Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly back into a world of typewriter ribbons, percolator steam, and rules so particular they were practically stitched into the lining of every working woman's blouse. We're talking about the 1970s, and more precisely the spoken and unspoken office rules that every American working woman was expected to follow without ever being handed a list. The proper hemline, the pantyhose that had to be worn no matter the heat, the coffee you were somehow always the one to make, the careful daily art of saying just enough and never one word too much. Before we settle in, take a soft moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if this gentle little corner of history is the sort of place you like to let your mind rest. And thank you sincerely to the kind viewer who suggested this one. You always send the loveliest ideas, and honestly this channel only grows because of the quiet nudges that people like you leave in the comments. So drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what the clock says wherever you are, because I know someone out there is tucked in at 2 a.m, half awake, and I'm so glad you are here with me. And if you would rather listen with your eyes already closed, the channel is now on Spotify as well, with the link waiting patiently in the description whenever you want it. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft, steady hush. Wiggle down under the blanket, let your shoulders drop away from your ears, and get comfortable. Really comfortable. Because tonight we are wandering into a decade that is closer than it feels, and yet already gone in 100 small ways. Have you ever wondered what a Monday morning actually felt like in 1973? With the alarm clock buzzing and your good work shoes waiting by the door like loyal little soldiers? What did the office smell like at 8 a.m, before anyone had said a single word, when it was only coffee and carbon paper and the faint metallic tang of the machines warming up? What did the women at the next desk whisper about, and what did they never once dare to say out loud? What were all those rules you followed so faithfully, even though not a one of them was ever printed on a page you could hold? And just like that, it is 1973. The percolator is already gurgling down in the break room. Somewhere along the hallway, a typewriter carriage returns with a bright little ding. Your coat is still cool from the walk-in, hung carefully on the rack by the door. And the workday is only just beginning. Let's start with the closet before the sun has fully cleared the rooftops. You stand in front of it in the grey half-light, and already the day has an opinion about what you're allowed to be. There is a whole quiet code written into these hangers, and you learned it long before anyone said it plainly. The skirt must fall at a respectable length, neither too far above the knee nor so long it looks careless. The blouse must be pressed, buttoned, modest, feminine. Nothing loud, nothing that draws the wrong sort of eye, and yet nothing dowdy either, because a working woman is expected to be pleasant to look at while remaining entirely unremarkable. You choose carefully, the way you choose everything, and you tell yourself you do not mind. It is the kind of small daily surrender that is harder to notice now. You run your fingers along the row of blouses, and each one carries a small history with it. The pale blue one you wore the day you were hired, back when your hands shook and you smiled a little too eagerly. The soft cream one that photographs well. The one you save for days when the important men from the head office come through. You have learned which colours are read as serious and which are read as frivolous. Which necklines invite a comment you would rather not receive. Which hemlines the older women in the office will quietly measure with their eyes as you walk past. None of this was ever taught to you in a single lesson. It arrived instead in 1,000 small corrections, a raised eyebrow here, a gentle word from your mother there, a supervisor once suggesting that a certain dress was perhaps a touch much for the office. So you settle on the grey skirt and the buttoned blouse, and you press them one more time even though they hardly need it, the iron hissing softly against the fabric, the smell of warm cotton rising in the quiet kitchen. You check the length in the mirror by turning slowly, watching how the hem moves, making sure it behaves when you sit, You choose the shoes that are respectable rather than the ones that are comfortable, because comfort and respectability rarely live in the same pair. And you fasten a small pin at your collar, nothing showy, just enough to say that you have made an effort, because an effort is expected always, and the absence of one would be noticed and remembered. There is a strange arithmetic to it all, a daily calculation you perform without ever writing it down. Too plain, and you seem to have given up. Too pretty, and you seem to be reaching for the wrong kind of attention. Too modern, and you seem to be making a statement. Too old-fashioned, and you seem to belong to another decade entirely. The narrow path between all of these runs right down the middle, and you have walked it so many mornings that your feet find it now on their own, without any conscious thought, the way you might find your way through a dark house you've lived in for years. Your mother did this before you, and her mother before her, this careful assembling of a self that would be acceptable to a world that had already decided what a woman ought to look like at her desk. You think of them sometimes as you dress, the long unbroken line of women rising in dim bedrooms and choosing the correct blouse. And there is a tenderness in that thought, even alongside the weariness of it. You're not the first to stand here weighing the hemline against the day. You will not be the last, though the rules are already beginning to soften at the edges in ways you can just barely feel. It is easy now to forget how much of a woman's morning was spent this way, in the quiet labour of becoming presentable to people who would never think to thank her for it. There were no soft cotton clothes to slip into, no sense that the workplace might one day bend a little toward the person, rather than the person bending entirely toward the workplace. You dressed for their comfort, for their expectations, for their idea of what a proper working woman was, and you learned to fold your own preferences away so neatly that after a while you could hardly find them. And yet, standing there in the early light, there is something almost like pride in it too, a competence you have earned. You know exactly how to present yourself. You know how to be correct. You have mastered a game whose rules were never fair and never explained. And there is a quiet dignity in mastering it anyway, in walking out the door each morning looking exactly as the world demands and carrying, underneath the buttoned blouse and the measured hem, a self that remains entirely your own. You take one last look in the mirror. The woman looking back is composed, professional, ready. She gives away nothing she does not choose to give. You gather your coat and your handbag, and you step out into the morning, correct from head to toe, and only you will ever know how much quiet effort it took to look so effortless. It is the kind of small daily surrender that is harder to notice now, and easy to forget was ever asked at all. Now the stockings. Even in the swelter of July, even when the air outside hangs thick and the office fans only push the heat around, bare legs are simply not done, so you sit on the edge of the bed and ease the pantyhose up carefully, mindful of the runs that seem to appear the moment you are late, and you keep a spare pair tucked in your desk drawer the way other people keep a sprin. For many of you, the girdle is still part of the ritual too, though its grip is beginning to loosen as the decade wears on. There is a particular discomfort to it all, a warm, constant reminder that comfort was never really the point. The point was the smooth, controlled, correct silhouette that the office expected you to arrive in, morning after morning after morning. The pantyhose themselves are a small marvel, newer than you sometimes remember, having only truly taken over from garters and separate stockings a handful of years before. There is a convenience to them, one continuous piece rather than the old fuss of clasps and seams, and you're grateful for that on the mornings when your hands are quick and the fabric cooperates. But they are delicate things, treacherous even, and you have learned to handle them the way you might handle something breathing. You bunch the leg down gently, ease your toes in, roll it up slowly along the calf and the knee, and pray the whole way that a rough fingernail or a stray thought does not send a run racing up your shin. That fear of the run is its own small tyranny. A single ladder climbing the back of your leg can undo the whole, careful picture, and so you carry the spare pair everywhere, in your handbag, in your bottom drawer, the way a sensible person carries an umbrella against a sky that might turn. You have performed emergency repairs in the ladies' lounge more times than you can count, dabbing a run with clear nail polish to stop it in its tracks, changing quietly into the spare while another woman keeps you company at the mirror, the two of you laughing softly at the absurdity of it, at how much can hinge on a thread. The girdle, for those of you who still wear it, is the older discomfort, the one your mother knew intimately and simply never questioned. It holds you in, smooths every line, presses your body into the shape the era prefers, and it does all of this at the cost of a full breath and an easy afternoon. You feel it through the long hours at the desk, the constant gentle pressure, the way it marks your skin by evening, so that undressing at night feels like being released from a polite and well-mannered cage. And yet you wear it, because the alternative, a natural and unbothered silhouette, still reads to too many eyes as careless as a woman who has let herself go. There is a whole geography of rules mapped onto a working woman's legs, and you have learned every border of it. The stockings must be worn regardless of the heat. The colour must be right, natural and unremarkable, nothing that calls attention. The seams on the older styles must run straight, and you would ask a friend to check the backs of your legs before you left the house, the two of you performing this small ritual of inspection at the door. Nothing about your body, from the waist to the ankle, was permitted to simply be. It was all managed, shaped, covered, corrected, presented. It is hard now to convey how constant that management was, how it hummed beneath every ordinary hour. You didn't think about it consciously most of the time, any more than you think consciously about breathing. But it was always there, the pinch and the pull, the awareness of the fabric, the low vigilance against the run. Comfort was a luxury quietly filed away under the heading of things that did not matter, and the discomfort was so ordinary, so universally shared among the women you knew, that to complain of it would have seemed almost strange. And still, the decade is turning even as you sit there on the edge of the bed. You have noticed the younger women arriving in trousers now in the newer offices testing the boundary, and you have felt the girdle loosening its hold on the world one drawer at a time. Something is shifting slowly, the way seasons shift before you can point to the day it happened. The idea that a woman's body might simply be allowed to exist at her desk, unbound and uncorrected, is beginning to feel less impossible than it once did. But this morning, in this year, you finish the ritual as you always have. You smooth the pantyhose one last time, you check the mirror, you tuck the spare pair into your bag out of long habit. The whole apparatus of shape and control settles into place around you, and you rise and you walk out into the day looking exactly as smooth and composed as the office requires. It is discomfort you carry so gracefully that no one will ever see it, and that, in its own quiet way, was always the entire point. It is not written anywhere, but you know it in your bones. You are expected to be at your desk before your boss walks in, coat already hung, typewriter uncovered, the first pot of coffee already muttering to itself in the corner. To arrive after him would be a small scandal, a crack in the smooth surface everyone works so hard to maintain. So you leave the house a little earlier than strictly makes sense, catching the bus in the thin morning light while the city is still rubbing sleep from its eyes. And at the end of the day, you linger. You tidy, you cover the machine, you wait to see if he needs one more thing before you gather your things. The day, in a sense, is bracketed entirely by someone else's hours. There is a particular quality to the office in those early minutes before the men arrive that you have come to treasure without ever quite admitting it. The rooms are still and cool and full of grey light, the desks waiting, the phones silent, the whole floor holding its breath before the day rushes in. You move through it unhurried, hanging your coat, lifting the cover from your typewriter, setting the percolator going. And for these few unwatched minutes, the office belongs almost to you. You know where everything lives. You know how the light falls. You are the one who wakes the place up morning after morning, and there is a quiet authorship in that, even if no one else would ever call it by such a name. You learned the timing of it early, the leaving a little earlier, the bus caught in the pale light while the streets are still soft and half empty. The people around you at that hour are the other early risers, the night workers heading home, the delivery men, the other women in their good coats heading toward their own desks in their own buildings, all of you moving through the tender first hour of the day with the particular patience of those who are never quite late, because they can never afford to be. You watch the city assemble itself through the bus window, the shops rolling up their gates, the diners lighting their signs, and there is a companionship in it, this shared early passage, even among strangers. By the time he arrives, everything must already be in its place. The coffee ready, the mail sorted, the messages from the answering service written up in your neat hand and waiting on the corner of his desk. His day should feel to him as though it simply began, smooth and frictionless, with no visible seam where all your preparation ends and his morning starts. That invisibility is the whole art of it. The better you are at your work, the less anyone can see that any work was done at all, and the office he walks into each morning is a small, quiet miracle that he has never once had to think about. And then, at the other end of the day, the same rule runs in reverse. When 5 o'clock comes and the men begin to gather their coats, you do not simply rise and leave. You wait. You finish the last letter, you cover the machine, you straighten the desk, and you keep half an ear tuned to his office in case there is one more thing. A report needed by morning, a call to place, a change to a schedule. To leave before you are sure would feel like a small abandonment, and so you linger in the emptying office, the last woman at her desk, while the light goes long and gold across the floor. The day, then, is not really your own from either end. It opens before your boss, and it closes after him, and the hours in between belong to his needs, his deadlines, his forgotten requests, his sudden urgencies. Your time is measured against his time, poured into the shape of his schedule, and this is so ordinary, so entirely expected, that it does not even strike you most days as a thing worth noticing. It is simply how the office works, how it has always worked, the natural order of a place where a woman's hours are understood to be in service of a man's. It is a strange thing to consider now from a distance, this bracketing of a life around someone else's clock. There is little sense today that a person ought to arrange the whole frame of their working day so that another's might run smoothly, that they ought to arrive first out of deference and leave last out of duty. The boundaries have loosened. The clock has become a little more your own, and the idea that your morning and your evening belong to your supervisor's convenience feels like something from a further country than it truly is. But you did it, faithfully, and you did it well, and there was a kind of steadfastness in it that deserves to be remembered kindly. You were the first light on in the office and the last one out, the quiet keeper of its hours, the one who opened the day and closed it again, and on the ride home, in the deep gold of the evening, tired in your bones, you would sometimes let yourself feel, just a little, the plain satisfaction of a day held together entirely by your own reliable hands. By the door there is a clock, and beside it a rack of cards, each one bearing a name, each one waiting to be fed into the slot with a firm little chunk that stamps the exact minute of your arrival in pale purple ink. You slide yours in and feel that small mechanical bite, the sound of your time being counted and kept. There is no rounding up in your favour here. 4 minutes late is 4 minutes late, noted and recorded, and everyone knows the supervisor reviews the cards. So you learn the rhythm of it, the exact moment to leave home, the shortcut through the lobby, the trick of the elevator that always seems to be somewhere else. Your morning becomes a quiet negotiation with a machine that does not care about the weather or the bus or the child you dropped at school. The clock hangs there like a small stern god, and its judgment is absolute and entirely without mercy. It does not know that the bus was late because of the rain. It does not know that you were up half the night with a feverish child, or that the elevator sat stubbornly on the 8th floor while you watched the second-hand climb. It knows only the moment your card meets its mechanism, and it records that moment in ink, and the ink does not argue and cannot be persuaded. There is something almost comic in the seriousness of it, this daily reckoning with a device, and yet the stakes are real enough that no one laughs. So you build your whole morning around it, the way you might build a small dam against a river. You know exactly how many minutes the walk to the bus stop takes, and how many the ride, and how many the passage through the lobby and up to the floor. You have learned which door lets you skip the crowd, which stairwell is faster than waiting for the elevator, which route shaves the crucial 90 seconds when the day has already conspired against you. You leave the house with a margin built in, always, because the margin is the difference between a clean card and a mark against your name. And the marks accumulate. The supervisor reviews the cards on a schedule everyone knows, running a practiced eye down the rows of purple stamps, and a pattern of small latenesses becomes a conversation you would very much rather not have. A gentle word in a quiet corner about reliability, about setting an example, about the importance of being seen to be dependable. You've watched other women receive that word, watched the colour rise in their faces, and you have resolved 100 times over to keep your own card spotless, to be the one whose times are always early, always safe. There is a particular cruelty in the way the clock cares nothing for the shape of a woman's morning. The men who designed this system, who set the rules and hung the clock, largely came from mornings unlike yours. They did not, as a rule, dress the children and start the breakfast and mind the household before catching the bus. They did not carry the second full day of labour that waited at home, the one that began the moment the paid day ended. And yet the clock measures everyone by the same rigid inch, as though every morning were identical, as though the path to the office were equally clear for all who walked it. Still, you master it, the way you master everything the office asks of you. You become fluent in its rhythm, precise in your timing, so reliable that your card becomes a small point of quiet pride, an unbroken run of proper times marching down the column. The clock, for all its sternness, rewards the disciplined, and you are nothing if not disciplined. You have made a study of punctuality out of pure necessity, and you wear your clean record like a modest badge that only you can see. It is a small thing, now, to swipe or to sign or simply to be trusted to arrive, and it is easy to forget the era when a machine by the door stamped your worth in purple ink each morning. There was a coldness to it, a sense that your time was not really yours but the company's, borrowed back to you in careful increments and reclaimed to the minute. The trust that later workers might take for granted, the assumption that a good employee will simply be where she needs to be, was not yet extended to you. Instead, there was the clock, watching, counting, remembering. But you met it every morning and you beat it, minute by minute, day by day. and there is a steadiness in that worth honouring. You were never the woman whose card told a story of lateness. You were the one already at her desk when the machine stopped mattering, coat hung, work begun, the small stern god by the door satisfied for one more day. And on the mornings when everything went wrong, and you made it anyway, breathless but on time, there was a private triumph in the sound of that little mechanical bite, the sound of you, once again, having won. Let's move to the little counter in the corner now, the one with the percolator and the stack of mismatched cups. Nobody assigned this to you, not officially, and yet here you are again, measuring out the grounds, filling the basket, waiting for the gurgle and hiss that means it is nearly ready. It does not seem to matter what your actual title is, whether you file or type or keep the books. When the pot runs dry, the eyes drift toward the women in the room, gently, expectantly, and you rise before you have even decided to. You carry cups to desks. You remember who takes cream and who takes it black and bitter. It is a small courtesy dressed up as a natural fact. This idea that tending to everyone's warmth is simply, obviously, a woman's quiet duty. The percolator itself has a personality by now, and you know it well. You know the exact amount of grounds that makes it right, the way it sputters and climbs, the little glass knob on the lid where the coffee jumps and darkens as it brews. You know the smell of it filling the corner and spreading out across the floor, that warm, bitter morning smell that means the day has truly begun. There is something almost pleasant in the ritual when you let yourself feel it, the measuring and the waiting, the small domestic competence of it, a familiar comfort in the middle of the working hours. But you're aware always of the quiet unfairness folded into the task. No one ever announced that the coffee was the women's responsibility. There was no memo, no line in any handbook, no moment when it was decided out loud. It simply settled onto you the way dust settles, invisibly and over time, until it had the weight of something that had always been true. The men do not make the coffee, the men drink the coffee, and they thank you sometimes warmly enough, and they hold out their cups when the pot comes round, and it does not occur to most of them that the arrangement could be any other way. You keep the whole small economy of it in your head. You know that the older gentleman near the window takes his with 2 sugars and a great deal of cream, and that the younger one in accounting takes his black and scalding and drinks it too fast. You know whose cup is whose among the mismatched collection, which chipped mug belongs to whom, which one to never ever give to the man who is particular about such things. It is a kind of care, this remembering, a low steady attentiveness to everyone's small preferences, and you perform it so smoothly that it looks like nothing at all. And that is precisely the trouble with it, the way the work disappears even as you do it. To carry warmth to a dozen desks all morning, to keep the pot full and the cups clean and everyone gently caffeinated, is genuine labour, real time and real attention spent in the service of others. But because it looks like courtesy, because it wears the soft clothes of kindness, it counts for nothing on any ledger. It will not appear in a review. It will not earn a raise. It is simply expected, the way the tides are expected, and its very reliability makes it invisible. There is a companionship in it too, though, that you would not want to lose. The counter in the corner becomes a small gathering place, and you find the other women there at odd moments through the day, refilling their own cups, trading a quiet word, sharing the brief warmth of each other's company between tasks. Some of the truest conversations you have at work happen in that corner, over the sputtering pot, in the little pauses that the coffee ritual carves out of the busy hours. The task may be unfair, but the corner it creates is a refuge, and you're grateful for it even as you resent the reason it exists. It is strange to think how completely that expectation has loosened since, how the assumption that the women would naturally tend to everyone's small comforts has faded into something a newer worker would find almost baffling. The idea that your title and your training and your skill would all step politely aside the moment a pot ran dry, that the eyes would find you across the room and you would rise without a word, belongs to a world that is quietly passing, even as you live in it. But you make the coffee, morning after morning, and you make it well, and you carry it to the desks with a grace that never once betrays the small weariness underneath. You're the keeper of the office's warmth, its quiet, steady hospitality. And if no one ever names that labour for what it truly is, you know the whole invisible architecture of it, the remembering and the tending and the endless gentle care. And there is a dignity in doing it beautifully even when no one thinks to see it at all. Now step into the large room where the sound never truly settles. This is the typing pool, and if you work here you know its particular music by heart. That steady overlapping clatter of a dozen keyboards, the bright bells of the carriage returns, the whisper of paper being rolled in and out, rows of desks, rows of women, each of you turning someone else's scrawled dictation into clean, correct, letter-perfect pages. There is a supervisor who walks the aisles and notices everything, the speed of your hands, the neatness of your work, the straightness of your posture. You are one voice in a chorus of machines, valued for accuracy and stamina, rarely for the thoughts moving quietly behind your eyes. And still, there is a strange companionship in that room, a warmth between women who understand each other without needing to say much at all. The sound is the first thing anyone notices about the pool, and the last thing they forget. It rises when the day begins, and it does not truly stop until the day ends, a wall of overlapping clatter so constant that after a while you cease to hear it as noise and begin to hear it as something almost like the sea. Each machine has its own small voice within the whole, and you can pick out the rhythm of the woman beside you, the particular cadence of her keys, the moment she pauses and the moment she resumes. You type inside that ocean of sound all day, and when you leave in the evening the sudden quiet of the street feels strange, as though a music you had stopped noticing had been switched off. The work itself demands a peculiar kind of endurance, a sustained perfection that never gets to rest. Page after page must come out clean, the margins even, the words correct, the whole thing letter perfect, because a page with an error is a page to be done again. Your fingers learn the keys so deeply that they no longer need your conscious mind flying across them while your thoughts wander somewhere else entirely, and yet the accuracy must hold even as your attention drifts. It is a strange doubled state, the hands wholly present and the mind free to roam, and you spend your days inhabiting it. The supervisor moves through the aisles like a slow tide, and you feel her passing even when your eyes are down. She watches the speed of your hands and the neatness of your finished pages and the way you hold yourself in your chair, and she keeps a quiet ledger of it all. To be fast is good. To be accurate is better. To be both, tirelessly, day after day, is the whole measure of your worth in this room, and there is little else here that anyone is looking for. Your cleverness, your judgment, the whole rich interior life moving behind your careful eyes, none of that is being counted. Only the pages, clean and correct and endless. And yet the room is not the grim place a stranger might imagine. Between the women who fill it there runs a current of quiet solidarity, a warmth built up over the long shared hours. You know each other's rhythms and each other's troubles. You cover for one another when someone's typing falls behind because her mind is on a sick child at home. You pass small kindnesses down the rows, a shared sweet, a whispered joke that ripples along the desks, a look exchanged over the machines that says everything without a single word spoken aloud. In a room that values you only for your hands, the women beside you see the rest of you, and that seeing is a kind of shelter. There is even a strange pride that grows in the pool, a pride in the craft of it. to type a long report flawlessly, to keep your pages spotless through an entire punishing afternoon, to be the one the supervisor trusts with the difficult jobs, all of this becomes a genuine mastery, hard-won and real. You are good at this, truly good, and the competence sits well in your hands. The work may be undervalued by the world, but it is not nothing, and you know the difference between a page done carelessly and a page done beautifully, even if no one else pauses to notice. It is a room that has all but vanished now, the great typing pool with its rows of women and its ocean of sound, and it is easy to picture it as merely bleak, a factory floor for words. But that misses the warmth of it, the companionship, the quiet dignity of women mastering a demanding craft together, holding one another up through the long clattering hours. Something was lost when the machines fell silent, alongside all that was gained. Some particular closeness that only comes from shared and steady labour. You spend your days there, one voice in the chorus, your fingers flying, your mind free, the women beside you knowing you in the way that matters. And when the clatter finally stops at the end of the day and you roll the last page free and rise from your chair, there is a tiredness in you that is not unpleasant, the good tiredness of real work done well, carried out from that loud, warm room into the sudden quiet of the evening. Let's talk about the machine itself, that heavy, humming IBM Selectric with its little spinning ball of type, the pride of the modern office. It is a marvel, truly faster and cleaner than anything your mother ever touched. But it is also unforgiving. Behind your original page sits a sheet of carbon and a second page, sometimes a third, so that every keystroke is copied straight through, and every mistake is copied straight through as well. A single wrong letter means reaching for the correction fluid, that small white bottle you keep close, dabbing and blowing gently and waiting for it to dry, hoping the smudge will not show. Perfection is the quiet expectation. Not good work, flawless work. A letter with a visible error is a letter you may well be asked to type all over again, from the very top. You remember the older machines, the ones with the hammers that struck up from below, the ones that jammed if you typed too eagerly, the ones your fingers had to fight. The Selectric feels like the future by comparison, humming there on your desk with its low electric warmth, its little sphere of type spinning to meet the page instead of an army of separate keys. It is faster, smoother, quieter, and there is a genuine pleasure in the way it responds to your touch, in the crisp, clean letters it lays down one after another. You are grateful for it, the way one is grateful for any tool that respects the skill of the hand that guides it. But the marvel of the machine does not soften the severity of the standard. The page that comes out of it must be perfect, and perfect is a demanding word. Behind your top sheet you have layered the carbon and the copies, that dark, tissue-thin paper that transfers every strike straight through to the pages beneath, so that one document becomes 2 or 3 in a single pass. It is clever and efficient and utterly unmerciful, because it means an error does not live on one page alone. It lives on all of them, copied faithfully down through the stack, one small mistake multiplied. So the correction fluid sits always within reach, that little bottle of white with its tiny brush in the cap, and you have grown intimate with its use. You lift the paper, you find the offending letter, you paint it over with a careful stroke, you blow on it softly to hurry the drying, and you wait, because to type over it too soon is to smear the whole repair into a grey mess that looks worse than the error you are hiding. And even done perfectly, the correction leaves a faint ghost, a slight thickness on the page that a sharp eye might catch, so that the safest thing, the thing that keeps your reputation spotless, is simply to make no mistakes at all. That is the standard you live under, the quiet, impossible standard of flawlessness. No one praises you for a clean page, because a clean page is merely expected, the baseline of your competence. But a page with a visible flaw is remembered, and a habit of flaws is a mark against your name, and a truly important letter with an error in it may come back to your desk with a request to do it again. All of it from the first line, however long it took. So you type with a low, constant vigilance humming beneath your ease, watching every word even as your fingers fly, catching the small errors before they can bloom. There is an artistry in it that the world outside never quite recognized. To produce page after page of spotless work hour after hour, to layer the carbons and keep the copies clean, to correct so invisibly that no ghost remains, all of this is a real and demanding craft. Your hands became precise instruments, your attention a finely tuned thing, and the documents that left your desk were small, quiet monuments to a discipline that took years to build. It looked effortless, and that was the point, and the effortlessness was the hardest part of all. It is difficult now to explain the weight of that unforgiving standard to anyone who has only ever typed on a screen, where a mistake vanishes with a single tap and leaves no trace at all, where a whole paragraph can be moved or undone or rewritten in an instant. The tyranny of the permanent page, the sin of the single wrong letter, the little bottle of white fluid and the careful breath upon it, all of it belongs to a world that has quietly dissolved. What was once a daily test of nerve and skill became, almost overnight, something no one would ever need to think about again. But you lived under that standard, and you met it, page after spotless page, day after day, and there is a real accomplishment in that worth honouring. You made perfection look like nothing. You held the whole demanding craft in your careful hands and never let the strain of it show. And on the good days, when the letters came out clean and the copies were crisp and the whole document was flawless, from the first word to the last, there was a quiet satisfaction in rolling it free from the machine, a small private pride in a thing done, against a hard standard, exactly right. It is mid-morning now, and the buzzer on your desk sounds. You gather your stenopad and your pencils and slip into his office, settling into the chair across the desk, ready. He begins to speak, quickly, without pausing for you, and your hand flies across the page in the elegant loops and hooks of shorthand. Greg or Pittman, a secret alphabet you spent months learning at Secretarial school. You capture every word while he stares out the window, thinking aloud, forgetting entirely that you are a person and not simply a recording device made of pencil and patience. This is the quiet magic they trained you for, to be wholly present and wholly invisible at once, to hold someone's every thought in your careful notes and then carry it away to be typed, polished, and returned as if it had always been perfect. The shorthand itself is a thing of genuine beauty, though few outside your world ever thought of it that way. Those flowing symbols, the light and heavy strokes, the loops and hooks and curves that stand for sounds rather than letters, make up a whole second language you carry in your hand. You spent long months learning it, seated in the bright rooms of a secretarial school, drilling the forms over and over until they flowed from your pencil as naturally as your own signature. It is fast, faster than any hand could ever be with ordinary writing, fast enough to keep pace with a man speaking at the speed of thought, and mastering it was no small thing. So when the buzzer calls you in, you are ready in a way that looks like nothing and took years to build. You settle into the chair with your pad braced against your knee, your pencil poised, and you wait for the flood. He does not slow for you. He rarely even looks at you. He turns toward the window and begins, the words tumbling out in the half-formed rush of a mind working itself out aloud, doubling back, correcting, wandering, and your hand simply follows, catching all of it, the the whole messy stream in those neat flying symbols that only you can read. There is a strange doubleness to the work that you have grown used to without ever quite making peace with it. You must be entirely present, your attention absolute, missing nothing, and at the same time you must be entirely absent, a quiet fixture in the room, a pencil and a pad, and a pair of listening hands. He forgets you are there in any full sense. He speaks freely because to him you are less a person than an instrument, a reliable mechanism for capturing his thoughts, and there is a small loneliness in being so present and so unseen at once, in holding a person's every word while he holds no thought of you at all. And then comes the second half of the magic, the transformation. You carry your pad back to your desk, and you read those flying symbols, and you begin to turn the rambling stream of his dictation into something clean and ordered and correct. You fix the grammar he mangled in his haste. You smooth the sentences that doubled back on themselves. You quietly repair the places where his thought lost its way, and you shape the whole rough torrent into a letter that reads as though it had sprung from his mind, fully formed and elegant. He will sign it and send it and think it entirely his own, and he will never know how much of its polish came from you. That too is part of the art, the invisible improving, the way you make him sound better than he spoke without ever letting it show. You're not merely a recorder, you're an editor, a translator, a quiet craftswoman of language, taking the raw and unshaped thing and returning it refined. But the craft must never announce itself. The letter must seem to be his, cleanly and entirely, and your hand in its making must vanish as completely as you vanished in the chair across his desk. To be good at this work is precisely to disappear from the evidence of it. It is a skill that has faded almost entirely now, the shorthand and the dictation, the pad braced against the knee, the whole graceful apparatus of capturing a voice by hand. Machines came to hold the words instead, and then the men learned to type their own, and the beautiful flying alphabet you spent months mastering became a curiosity, a thing found in old notebooks that no one alive can read. A whole craft and a whole way of being useful quietly slipped out of the world. But you held it in your time, and you held it superbly. You caught the uncatchable stream of another mind and shaped it into something fine, present and invisible both, your careful hand behind 100 letters that carried someone else's name. There was a quiet mastery in it that the world never properly saw, and you carried it out of his office each day in the loops and hooks of your pad, a secret language and a secret skill, entirely and unmistakably your own. There is a way of speaking here that you absorbed so long ago, you no longer hear yourself doing it. You address the men as Mr., always, with the small respectful weight the word carries. You say yes, sir, and of course, and right away, and you keep your own opinions folded neatly and put away, offered only when asked, and sometimes not even then. To disagree openly, to correct him, to push back on a decision you can plainly see as a mistake, all of that lives outside the lines of what a working woman is permitted. So you learn the softer arts instead. You learn to suggest without seeming to suggest, to steer gently while appearing only to follow. It is a whole language of deference, spoken fluently by women who understood exactly how much power lived in what went unsaid. The forms of it are so deeply worn into you that they come without any thought at all. The men are muster, spoken with that particular respect, while you are addressed by your first name or by something softer still. Their word is the final word, and yours is the agreeing echo, the yes, sir, and the of course, and the right away that smooth every exchange and keep the surface of the day untroubled. You said these things before you ever weighed them, learned them the way you learned your manners as a girl, and they flow from you now as naturally as breath. But underneath the smooth, agreeing surface, your mind is working all the time, and this is the part the men rarely see. You know the office better than most of them. You know where the files are, how the accounts truly run, which supplier is reliable and which is not, what will go wrong with a plan before it has even been set in motion. You see the mistakes coming, sometimes long before they arrive, and yet the direct word, the plane that will not work, sir, is a door that is largely closed to you. To say it outright would be to overstep, to seem to know better than the man who outranks you, and that is a line a wise woman does not simply walk across. So you master the indirect arts, the quiet craft of steering without seeming to steer. You learn to ask a question that plants the answer you were hoping for. You learn to wonder aloud whether he had considered a certain thing, so that the better idea seems to bloom in his own mind. You learn to raise a gentle concern so softly that it lands as helpfulness rather than challenge, to guide the decision toward the sensible outcome while letting him keep the whole feeling of having chosen it himself. It is diplomacy of the highest order, performed daily, and it is exhausting in a way that no one ever quite acknowledges. There is real skill in it, and even a kind of power, though it is a power that must never be named. The women who are best at this are the ones who keep whole departments running smoothly, who quietly prevent the worst mistakes, who shape the course of things from a chair that holds no authority on paper at all. You have watched the finest of them work, the older women who can turn a bad decision aside with nothing but a well-placed question and a patient smile, and you have learned from them the way an apprentice learns a trade, absorbing the moves too subtle to be taught outright, and yet the cost of it settles on you all the same, the constant self-management, the swallowing of the plain true word, the labour of dressing every observation in the soft clothes of deference before it can be safely offered. To always be steering sideways, to never simply say the thing you see, to hold your own good judgment behind a screen of yes sir and of course, is a quiet daily weight. It asks you to be perpetually clever and perpetually invisible, to influence everything and claim nothing, and there are evenings when the sheer effort of all that softness leaves you more tired than any typing ever could. It is a manner of speaking that has loosened a great deal since, this elaborate grammar of deference, and a newer worker might scarcely believe how total it once was. The idea that you could not simply say what you thought, that your clearest insight had to be smuggled in sideways to spare a man the discomfort of being corrected by a woman, belongs to a world that has been slowly talking its way free of it. The plain word offered directly and received as ordinary was a small freedom you didn't yet fully have, but you spoke the older language fluently, and you spoke it with grace, and there was a quiet brilliance in it that deserves to be seen at last. You held whole offices together with nothing but tact and patience and the artful placement of a question. You guided and shaped and rescued, all from a chair with no power written into it, all in a voice that never once rose above deferential, and though the world credited the men with the good decisions you had gently steered them toward, you knew, and the other women knew, exactly whose quiet skill had kept the whole delicate thing from falling down. Let's pause at the front of the office now, where the telephone lines all come home to rest. If you work the switchboard or the reception desk, your voice is the first thing the outside world meets, and so your voice must be trained, bright but not shrill, warm but never familiar. You answer before the second ring, you recite the company name in that particular pleasant cadence, and you connect the calls with a practiced motion, pulling the cords, settling them into their little sockets. You're expected to remember names, to soothe the impatient, to protect the men from callers they would rather not speak to, all while sounding as though nothing in the world could trouble you. It is performance, really, an hourly performance of calm, offered up to strangers who will never once see your face. The switchboard itself is a wonder of cords and sockets and small glowing lights, and to work it well is to conduct a kind of quiet symphony all day long. A light blinks, and you answer, and you listen, and you decide, and your hands move to pull the right cord and press it into the right socket, connecting one voice to another across the building or across the city. When the calls come in a rush, several lights blinking at once, the whole board demanding you at the same moment, your hands fly among the chords with a speed and certainty that took months to build, and you hold a dozen conversations in your head at once and drop not a single one. But it is the voice that is truly the work, the voice that is scrutinized and shaped and held to a standard as strict as any typed page. It must be bright, but never shrill or grating. It must be warm, but never so warm that it invites familiarity. It must be endlessly, unshakably pleasant, carrying no trace of the tiredness or the frustration or the ordinary human weather moving through you, so that every stranger who calls meets the same smooth, welcoming tone no matter the hour or the trouble of the day. You put that voice on each morning the way you put on your good blouse, and you wear it steadily until the day is done. And behind the pleasant voice there is a great deal of quick and careful judgment that no caller ever hears. You are the gatekeeper of the whole office, the one who decides, in an instant, which calls go through and which are gently held at bay. You learn to recognize the voices that must always reach a certain man, and the voices he would very much rather avoid, and you learn to turn the latter away so smoothly that they never quite realize they have been turned. You shield the men from the callers they do not want. You soothe the ones who arrive angry. You manage the whole flow of the outside world into the building, all in that same unruffled tone. The performance of calm is the heart of it, and it is more demanding than anyone outside the desk would guess. A caller may be furious, unreasonable, unkind, and still your voice must not waver, must stay warm and steady and helpful through all of it, absorbing the heat without reflecting any back. You become an expert in a particular kind of grace under pressure, in staying gentle when you're being tested, in the long, slow patience of soothing a stranger who will never thank you and will never know your name. It is emotional labour of a high order, though no one in that era had yet thought to call it labour at all. There is an art to the endless pleasantness too, a craft in making the manufactured calm sound entirely natural. The best of the women at the front desk make it seem as though nothing could ever ruffle them, as though the warmth in their voices simply flows without effort, and the effort is precisely what they have learned to hide. You have felt your own face aching from a smile the caller cannot even see, held for hours, poured into your voice because a smile can be heard down a telephone line, and you have marvelled a little at how much unseen work goes into sounding as though there is no work at all. It is a role that has thinned and scattered since, the great switchboard with its cords and lights largely gone the way of so much else. The single trained voice at the front of the office, replaced by machines and menus and a dozen scattered lines. A newer worker might never know the particular discipline of it. The months of learning the board and the voice, the whole day spent as the calm human face, a company turned toward the world. Something graceful passed out of the ordinary hours when the last of those boards went dark. But you sat at the front and you did it beautifully, the chords flying and the voice never wavering, the whole restless world arriving in your ear and meeting your unshakable warmth. You were the first thing the office offered to every stranger, its steady, pleasant welcome, its patient, soothing heart, and you held that performance up hour after hour with a grace that hid its cost entirely. And when the last light blinked out at the end of the day and you finally let the trained voice fall away, there was a quiet relief in it, and beneath the relief, a real and earned pride in having been, all day long, the calm at the centre of the noise, something small happens a dozen times a day, so small you have stopped flinching at it. A man leans out of his office and asks one of the girls to bring him the file, and he means you, though you're 38 and have run this department in every way that matters for 11 years. The girls. It follows you whether you're 22 or 55, whether you're newly hired or the steady heart the whole floor quietly depends upon. There is affection in it sometimes, and habit, and something else underneath that keeps you gently, permanently in your place. Your honey and sweetheart and dear, addressed the way one addresses someone who is pleasant and useful and not entirely to be taken seriously. And you answer to all of it, because answering is simply part of the job. The word arrives so constantly that it has worn a smooth groove into your days. The girls will type that up. Ask one of the girls. Have a girl bring me a coffee. It floats through the office as naturally as the sound of the machines, spoken without malice most of the time, spoken by men who would be genuinely puzzled to learn it landed as anything but ordinary. And that is the strange heart of it, the way the smallest words can hold a whole world of assumption, can keep a grown woman gently suspended in a permanent girlhood no matter how many years she's given to the work. You have watched the newest young woman arrive, barely out of school, nervous at her first desk, and you have watched the oldest woman on the floor, silver-haired and unflappable, the one who knows where every file has lived for 2 decades, and you have heard them both called by the same soft diminishing word. Age does not release you from it. Competence does not release you from it. You could run the entire department, hold the whole delicate machinery of it together with your 2 capable hands, and still be the girl who is asked to fetch the folder, because the word was never really about your age at all. There is affection folded into it, and you do not want to pretend otherwise, because that would be its own kind of untruth. The honey and the sweetheart and the dear are often warm, offered by men who mean kindly, who would be wounded to think they had slighted you. Some of them you're genuinely fond of in return. But the warmth and the diminishment travel together, braided so tightly you can no longer separate the strands, and the tenderness in the word does nothing to loosen the way it keeps you small. You can be cherished and dismissed in the very same breath, and you have learned to hold both at once. You answer to all of it, and the answering is its own quiet labour. You come when you are called by a name that is not quite your name. You fetch and you type and you smile and you do it pleasantly, because pleasantness is expected and its absence would be noticed. To bristle at the word, to ask to be called something else, would mark you as difficult, as humorless, as a woman who cannot take a small thing in the spirit it was surely meant. So you swallow the small flinch again and again, until you have swallowed it so many times that the flinch itself has nearly gone quiet, and only a faint residue of it remains, deep down where no one can see. And yet you know exactly who you are, whatever they call you. You know the 11 years, the department held together, the crises quietly averted, the men who would be lost without you and have never once said so. The word may keep you a girl in the language of the office, but it cannot touch the woman you actually are, the seasoned, capable, essential woman who keeps the whole floor from coming apart at the seams. There is a private dignity in holding that truth close, in knowing your own worth so clearly that no small word can dent it. It is a naming that has faded a great deal since. The casual girls that once floated so freely through every office, and a newer worker might be startled to learn how ordinary it once was, how a woman of any age might be reduced to it a dozen times before lunch. The plain respect of being called by one's own name, one's own title, one's own grown and rightful self, was a small thing not yet fully granted, and its slow arrival was a quiet revolution all its own. But you carried the word with a grace it did not deserve, and you never let it shrink the truth of you underneath. You answered when they called, and you did the work, and you knew the whole time exactly how much of the place rested on your unremarked shoulders. And on the evenings when the office had emptied and only you remained, closing it down with your practiced hands, you were nobody's girl at all, only yourself, whole and capable and entirely aware of it, the steady heart of a place that had never quite learned your name. Look at your desk for a moment. It is yours, and yet it is not really yours. You may keep a small frame photograph, perhaps, and a tidy little dish for paper clips, but the rules of decorum here are firm and unspoken. Nothing cluttered, nothing too personal, too colourful, too much a window into an actual life. The surface must stay clean and professional, ready at all times for a visitor's glance or a supervisor's passing eye. So you arrange your small kingdom carefully, the pencils sharpened and lined up, the papers squared, the typewriter centred. It is a strange kind of ownership. This space you occupy 8 hours a day and are never quite permitted to make your own. You bloom in the margins quietly, in the ways they cannot see. The single photograph is your one permitted flag, and you have chosen it with care. Perhaps it is the children caught squinting in the summer sun. Perhaps it is your mother, or the small house you're saving toward, or a face you love turned toward the camera in some easier moment. It sits in its modest frame at the corner of the desk, and it is the one small window you're allowed to keep open onto the life that waits for you beyond these walls. Everyone has one, and everyone understands the rule of it, that one is charming and two begins to look like clutter, that a desk is not a mantelpiece, and a working woman is not to mistake it for one. The rest of the surface must speak only of competence, the pencils sharp and arranged, the papers stacked and squared to the edges, the stapler and the tape and the little dish of clips all in their assigned places, the typewriter sitting square and central like the altar it nearly is. There is a real pleasure in this order, you will admit, a satisfaction in a desk kept beautifully, in the way an organised surface answers the chaos of the day. But there is also a watchfulness woven into it, the knowledge that the tidiness is not merely for you, that a supervisor passing by reads your desk as a report on your character, that a cluttered surface would be noted and remembered. So you keep it spare, and you keep yourself out of it mostly. The world would tell you this is simply professionalism, and there is truth in that. But there is something more particular in it too, a sense that a woman's desk especially must not betray too much of the messy human underneath. Not the worries, not the ambitions, not the whole rich, complicated interior that you carry in with you each morning and are quietly asked to check at the door. The desk is a stage set dressed to look like efficient emptiness, and you are its careful keeper. And yet you find your ways, as women always have, to live inside the constraint. You bloom in the margins, in the small permitted spaces, in the touches so subtle that only you would ever read them. The particular pen you love, worn smooth by your hand, the blotter positioned just so, the drawer out of sight where the real life is kept, the aspirin and the spare stockings and the mints and the small comforts, a hidden pocket of yourself tucked safely below the professional surface. The desk above may be impersonal, but the drawer below is yours entirely, a secret little room where you actually live. There is a quiet artistry even in this, in making a home of the margins, in expressing yourself so faintly that no rule is broken, and yet the space is unmistakably tended by a particular soul. The women who kept the finest desks were not merely tidy. They had made peace with the constraint and then quietly outwitted it, turning discipline into a kind of grace, arranging their small kingdoms so beautifully that the very restraint became a form of style. You learned that art too, the art of presence within absence, of self within the appearance of no self at all. It is a strange rule to explain now, In an age when a desk might overflow with photographs and plants, and small bright evidence of a whole personality, when workers are gently encouraged to make their corners their own. The idea that your 8 hours a day should leave almost no trace of you, that the surface must stay swept clean of your actual life, belongs to a more buttoned world, one that asked women in particular to take up as little visible room as they could. But you kept your desk beautifully, in your time, spare and correct and quietly yours, and you found the margins and you bloomed in them anyway. You made a small ordered kingdom out of the space they gave you, and then, in ways only you could see, you made it home. And when you covered the typewriter at the end of the day and squared the last of the papers and slid the drawer of your secret comforts shut, you left behind a desk that told the office exactly what it wished to see, and told you, alone, something truer underneath. Here is one of the harder rules, the kind that lives entirely in the air. You may work hard, and you're expected to. You may be clever, capable, faster and sharper than half the men who outrank you. But you must not let it show too plainly, and you must never, ever seem to want more than you have been given. To visibly reach for a promotion, to speak openly of running the department yourself one day, would be to break something the office prefers to keep intact. So ambition becomes a private thing, a warm coal you carry carefully in your chest and shield with both hands. You do the work and let the credit drift upward to someone else's name, and you tell yourself most days that being needed is very nearly the same as being valued. The rule is never spoken, and that is precisely what makes it so difficult to fight. No one tells you in plain words that a woman must not want too much. It is simply understood, absorbed from the shape of everything around you, from the way the promotions have always flowed and the offices with windows have always been filled. You learn it the way you learn the weather of a place, by living in it, by feeling which way the wind reliably blows, and you arrange yourself accordingly long before anyone would ever need to make the rule explicit. So you tend the coal in secret. The ambition is real as any man's, a genuine hunger to do more, to lead, to be trusted with the larger work, to see your own name on the door of the office you already run in all but title. You feel it burning quietly through the days, and you keep it hidden, because to let it show would be to become a certain kind of woman in their eyes, the pushy one, the one who forgot her place, the one who is talked about in a lowered voice. And so you shield the warmth of your own wanting with both careful hands, letting no one see how brightly it burns. You do the work regardless, and you do it superbly, and you watch the credit for it float up and away to settle on another's shoulders. The plan you devise becomes his plan, the problem you solve becomes his triumph. The department you hold together becomes, in the telling, a thing that runs smoothly under his steady leadership, and your hand in all of it dissolves quietly into the background, unnamed and unbilled. You have grown used to this, the way you grow used to any recurring weather, and yet each time a small private ache accompanies it. The ache of the invisible, the one who built the thing and stood unmentioned beside it. To survive it, you tell yourself the comforting things, and the comforting things are not entirely lies. You are needed here, deeply, in ways the men could not manage without. You are trusted with the true running of things even if the title never comes. Being indispensable is its own kind of standing, you tell yourself, and being needed is very nearly the same as being valued. And on the good days you almost believe it, and the belief carries you, and it is only in the quieter moments, alone at your desk in the emptied evening, that you feel the distance between very nearly and truly. There is a real cost to the hiding, a weight that the world of the era never quite reckoned with. To carry a genuine ambition and be required, always, to keep it out of sight, to work at the very top of your ability and let the recognition drift elsewhere, to shrink your own visible wanting so that no one is discomforted by a woman who reaches. All of this is a quiet and continuous labour of the spirit. It asks you to be excellent and self-effacing at once, to give your best and claim none of it. And there is a tiredness that comes from that which no amount of rest quite touches. It is a rule that has loosened, thank goodness, in the years since, though not without a long fight. And a newer worker might scarcely believe there was a time when a woman's plain and healthy ambition had to be smuggled through the office like something faintly shameful. The freedom to want openly, to reach without apology, to say aloud that you mean to lead one day, was a small liberty not yet fully won, and its slow arrival was hard-earned by women who carried their coals in silence so that others might one day carry them in the open. But you tended yours faithfully, and you never let it go out. And there's a fierce, quiet dignity in that worth honouring. You did the work at the height of your powers, gave it everything, and kept the warm, private truth of your own wanting, alive through years that asked you to hide it. And somewhere in you the coal still glows, unspent and undimmed, a reminder that the wanting itself was never the flaw, that a woman who reached in secret was reaching all the same, and that the fire she guarded so carefully was, in the end, entirely and rightfully her own. It is noon now, and the whistle of the hour releases you into a brief hour that is almost your own. Where you go with it follows its own quiet map. There is the ladies' lounge, with its worn sofa and its mirror, where women gather to eat sandwiches brought from home and to talk in the easy shorthand of people who trust one another. There are the counters and coffee shops nearby that feel comfortable to walk into alone, and the ones, subtly, that do not. A woman dining by herself still draws a certain look in 1973, a small assumption, a raised eyebrow she has learned to ignore. So you find your places, the friendly ones, and you cherish this hour for the small freedom it is, before the clock calls you back to your chair. The ladies' lounge is the heart of it, a room that means far more than its worn furnishings would suggest. There is the sagging sofa that has held 1,000 tired women, the long mirror for checking a hem or refreshing a face, the small table where the brown paper bags are opened and the sandwiches from home come out. It is not a grand room by any measure, but it is a haven, one of the few places in the whole building where you are entirely off the stage, where no man's eye follows you, where you can let the pleasant professional face relax into something plainer and truer. And it is there, over the sandwiches, that the real talk happens. The women gather in that room and speak in the easy shorthand of people who understand each other completely, who need only half a sentence to convey a whole situation, who can say more with a raised eyebrow than a memo could say in a page. You trade the news of your lives, the children and the husbands, and the small triumphs and troubles, and you trade the news of the office too, who is difficult and who is kind, which supervisor to watch, which battle is worth fighting, and which to let quietly pass. It is counsel and comfort and community, all folded into a single stolen hour. Beyond the lounge lies the neighbourhood, and the neighbourhood has its own careful geography for a woman alone. There are the counters and the coffee shops where a lone woman may sit and eat in peace, comfortable places you have mapped over months, where the waitress knows your face and no one thinks twice about your solitary sandwich. And there are the other places, the ones where a woman by herself is still a small curiosity, where the look comes, the faint raised eyebrow, the quiet assumption that a woman dining alone is either waiting for someone or somehow adrift. You learned early which doors were easy and which were not, and you steer by that map without even thinking about it now. That look, the one that greets a woman alone, has grown fainter across the years but has not yet vanished in your time. It carries the old idea that a woman's proper place is beside someone, that her solitude in a public room is a thing to be gently wondered at, And though you have long since learned to ignore it, to lift your chin and order your lunch and pay it no mind, the ignoring is itself a small daily effort. You have claimed your right to sit and eat alone in a friendly place, and claiming it, quietly, again and again, is its own modest act of independence. So you treasure this hour, however you spend it, because it is the one stretch of the working day that bends toward being yours, in the lounge with the other women, or alone at a friendly counter with a magazine and a cup of coffee. You are, for these 60 minutes, released from the constant low performance of the office. You can breathe. You can be plain and tired and honest. You can laugh without measuring it, speak without softening it, be for a little while simply yourself among people who understand, or simply yourself alone. And both are a kind of freedom you have learned not to take for granted. It is easy to overlook now the particular preciousness of that hour, and the careful map a woman had to keep of where she could comfortably go, in an age when a person might lunch anywhere alone without a second glance and think nothing of it. The small unfreedoms of it, the places that were not quite welcoming, the look that met a woman on her own, have faded to the point where a newer worker might not believe they were ever there. But they were, and you navigated them with a grace that made them look like nothing. And when the hour ends and the clock calls you back, you carry a little of that freedom with you to your chair, refreshed by the lounge or the friendly counter, steadied by the company of women or the quiet of your own solitude. The afternoon waits, and the machines, and the performance resumes. But for 1 hour in the middle of the day you were released, and you made a small good life inside that hour, and that, in its modest way, was enough to carry you through to 5. Let's talk about the air itself, thick and blue and constant. Nearly everyone smokes, and they smoke everywhere, at their desks, in the meetings, in the elevator on the way up. There is an ashtray on your desk as surely as there is a telephone, and it fills through the day with the soft grey evidence of everyone's nerves. The cigarette is part of the whole office choreography, the pause it gives you, the small ritual of lighting and exhaling, the thing to do with your hands while a man decides your afternoon. No one questions it. No one imagines a world without it. The haze hangs over the whole floor like weather, settling into the curtains and the carpet and the very fibres of your good work blouse, so that you carry a little of the office home on your skin every single night. The air of the office is a thing you have stopped noticing precisely because it never lifts. It is always faintly blue, always carrying that particular smell of tobacco woven into everything, the walls and the drapes and the upholstery all long since seasoned with it. A visitor from some smokeless future would find it startling, would feel the haze in their throat and their eyes, but to you it is simply the atmosphere of the working day, as unremarkable as the hum of the machines or the buzz of the lights. You breathe it without thought, morning to evening, and it has become the very texture of the place. The ashtray sits on your desk as a fixture, as expected as the telephone or the stapler, and it fills steadily through the day. There is one on every desk, glass or metal, and they are emptied and they fill again. The soft grey ash accumulating like a record of the hours passing, the small stubs piling up as the deadlines press and the tensions rise. In a meeting, the ashtrays crowd the centre of the table, the smoke rising from a dozen hands at once, the whole room slowly disappearing into a companionable fog as the men talk and the decisions get made. For you, the cigarette is more than habit. It is a small piece of choreography that the day has handed you, a permitted pause in a life of very few pauses. To draw one out, to light it, to take that first slow exhale, is a moment that belongs to you alone in the middle of everyone else's demands. It gives your hands something to do while you wait, while a man mulls over the thing you have just typed, while the afternoon is decided somewhere above your head. It is a way of holding still, of gathering yourself, a socially blessed little interval of quiet in the midst of the noise. And it is a thread of connection too, the shared cigarette, the offered light, the small society of smokers that runs right through the office and levels its ranks for a moment. To lean toward a match held out by a colleague, to share that brief close ritual, is a kind of ordinary intimacy that the day makes room for. The women bond over it in the lounge, the men over it in their offices, and now and then the smoke drifts across the usual boundaries, and a supervisor lights your cigarette or you light his, and for that small moment the office softens into something almost equal. No one in your world questions any of this, and that is perhaps the strangest thing to hold in mind. The idea that the very air might be harming you, that the constant haze settling into your lungs and your clothes and your hair might carry a hidden cost, has not yet arrived with any force. The advertisements still speak of cigarettes warmly, still wrap them in glamour and ease, and the whole culture takes them entirely for granted. You light them freely, and you breathe the shared blue air, and it does not occur to you or to anyone that a smokeless office could ever be anything but strange. It is one of the things that has changed most completely since. The great blue haze simply lifted from the working world. The ashtrays vanished from the desks. The air of the office grown clean, in a way that would astonish anyone who knew it, thick with smoke. A newer worker would find the old atmosphere almost unimaginable, the meetings disappearing into fog, the perpetual grey record filling on every desk, the way a whole day's smoke rode home on a person's skin. But you lived inside that blue air, and it was simply your world, neither good nor bad in your mind, but only ordinary, the atmosphere in which the whole working life was carried out. You breathed it, and you shared it, and you took your small permitted pauses in it, and at the end of the day you carried a little of it home, the faint scent of the office woven into your good blouse, a trace of the hours you had spent, riding quietly home with you into the evening. There is a firm and simple rule about the telephone on your desk. It belongs to the company, and it is for company business, and the life you live outside these walls is expected to wait quietly at the door until 5 o'clock. If the school needs to reach you, if a sick child at home needs tending, if anything at all from your real existence presses in, you handle it in whispers, briefly, apologetically, glancing toward the supervisor's office as you do. The boundary runs entirely one way, of course. Your work follows you home in the evening in the form of exhaustion and unfinished worry, but your home is not permitted to follow you here. You learn to seal yourself into 2 separate people each morning, and to hope most days that the seam does not show. The rule sounds reasonable enough on its face, and perhaps that is why it holds so firmly. The telephone is the company's, the time is the company's, and a working woman is not to spend either on the tangle of her own private life. You understand the logic, and yet the logic falls hardest on you, because it is you, more often than not, who carries the household in your mind even as you type. Who is the one the school will call? Who holds the whole web of home responsibilities that do not politely pause between the hours of 9 and 5 simply because you have arrived at desk? So when the call comes, and it will, the small emergency from the other life, you handle it in whispers. You cup your hand around the receiver and lower your voice and speak quickly, your eyes flicking toward the supervisor's door, your whole body arranged to make the call as small and invisible as possible. Yes. Is he very warm? Give him the drops and I'll be home at 5. You keep it to a handful of murmured sentences, and you hang up with a quiet apology already forming, and you turn back to your work with your heart still half at home, and your face composed into professional calm. It is the one-way nature of the boundary that sits so strangely when you let yourself notice it. Your work is permitted to follow you home without limit, riding along in your tired body and your restless evening thoughts, the unfinished letter and the difficult supervisor, and the worry over tomorrow all coming with you through the door and into your own quiet hours. But your home is not granted the same passage in return. It must wait outside, muffled, apologised for, kept firmly beyond the office wall, as though the two halves of your life were not both, entirely, your life. So you learn to be two women, and to perform the change each morning at the threshold. There is the woman of the household, who dresses the children and knows the whole tender machinery of home, and there is the woman of the office, composed and efficient and seemingly untroubled by anything beyond the work in front of her. You seal the first away as you arrive, and you unseal her again as you leave, and in between you keep the seam pressed tightly shut, hoping it does not show, hoping no worry from the hidden half leaks through onto your professional face. The effort of that sealing is real, though no one ever named it or credited it. To hold the whole of your outside life at bay through the long working hours, to keep the worry over a sick child from showing in your typing, to be present and untroubled at your desk while half your mind stands guard at home, is a quiet and continuous labour of division. You perform it every day, this splitting of yourself, and you perform it so well that the office sees only the calm, efficient half, and never guesses at the whole complicated woman holding it all together underneath. It is a boundary that has softened considerably since. The wall between the working life and the home life grow more permeable, more humane, more willing to admit that a person is a single whole and not two sealed halves. A newer worker might take for granted a quick call to check on a child, a moment of the outside life allowed briefly in, a workplace that grants a person the grace of being one continuous human being. That small mercy was not yet fully yours, but you managed the division with a skill that deserves to be seen. You kept the two lives apart when the office demanded it, and you carried both of them faithfully, the home in your heart and the work in your hands, and you let neither one fall. And when 5 o'clock finally came and you stepped out through the door, the seam could at last relax. The two women could become one again, and you could walk home whole into an evening where, for a few hours at least, no rule stood between you and the whole of your own life. Here is a rule that shaped the whole arc of a working woman's life. In many offices, marriage itself was a turning point, and a growing belly was very nearly a resignation letter written by your own body. To become visibly pregnant was, in countless workplaces, simply to be expected to go, gently or otherwise, back to the home where the thinking of the era insisted you truly belonged. There was little to protect you, no firm law standing between you and that door until nearly the end of the decade. So women learned to plan around it, to hide it, to calculate carefully, to grieve quietly for the work they loved and were being eased away from. It is one of the losses that hides beneath all the tidy nostalgia, the careers set down not by choice, but by the quiet weight of what everyone simply assumed. The assumption ran so deep that it hardly needed to be stated. A woman worked until she married, or until she began a family, and then she went home, because home was understood to be her true and natural place, and the office only a way station she passed through on the road to it. This was not presented as a hardship. It was presented as the proper order of things, the way a life was supposed to unfold, and the women who wished to stay, who loved their work and did not want to set it down, found themselves quietly out of step with a world that had already decided where they belonged. For the woman who became pregnant, the decision was often made for her before she could make it herself. The growing belly was read as an announcement of departure, and the questions began, gently at first, about her plans, about when she would be leaving, the leaving treated as a foregone conclusion rather than a choice. There was little standing between her and that expectation, no firm protection in the law until the very end of the decade. And so she was eased toward the door with a smile and a small gift, and the general understanding that this was, of course, what happened, what always happened, what was meant to happen. So women learned to plan around the rule with a quiet strategic care. They calculated timing. They kept their news close for as long as they could, hiding the early months, buying themselves a little more of the work they were not ready to give up. They made arrangements in advance, thought several moves ahead, treated the whole arc of a career and a family as a delicate problem to be managed rather than a life to be freely lived. It was a great deal of hidden labour, this planning, and it fell entirely on the women, who bore both the bodies and the burden of working around what their bodies would cost them. And beneath the planning ran a quiet grief that the era gave no room to speak. To love your work, to be good at it, to have built something of yourself in it over years, and then to be eased away from it not by your own choice but by the simple weight of everyone's assumption, is a real loss. And it was a loss suffered largely in silence. The women who wanted to stay and could not, the ones who set down careers they treasured because the world left them no other way, carried that sorrow privately, and it went almost entirely unrecorded, folded away beneath the bright surface of the decade. It is one of the hardest things to hold in mind when we look back with fondness on those years, this quiet cost that so many women paid. The nostalgia remembers the fashions and the music and the warmth of the times, and forgets the woman at her desk who loved her work and was gently told it was time to go home, who packed up her small photograph and her drawer of comforts and walked out a door she had not chosen to walk through. Her loss was real, and it deserves to be named alongside all the sweeter memories. The rule loosened at last as the decade turned toward its close, the law at last beginning to stand between a woman and that door, the assumption slowly giving way to the radical idea that a woman might build a family and keep her work both, that the choice might actually be hers to make. It was a hard-won change, and it came too late for many, for all the women who had already set down what they loved and could not take it up again. But those women deserved to be remembered with tenderness, the ones who worked around the rule and grieved beneath it and carried the whole weight of it with such quiet grace. They loved their work as fully as anyone, and they lost it to an assumption they never agreed to, and they bore that loss without complaint in a world that scarcely acknowledged it. And if the door opened a little wider for those who came after, it was in part because these women had pressed against it first, quietly, with all the strength that quiet was allowed. Let's speak of money now, in the hushed way the office prefers. What you earn is a private number, and there is an unspoken agreement that you will not compare it, not with the woman at the next desk, and certainly not with the man doing much the same work a few feet away. That silence, of course, is not accidental. It keeps a great many things comfortably in place, and if you did somehow learn the man's figure, you would find it larger than yours, noticeably, for reasons no one would quite explain, offered up as simply the way of things. $1 of a man's work was worth more than yours on the ledger, and you were expected to accept this without complaint, to be grateful for the paycheck at all. The quiet around pay was never really about privacy. It was about keeping the peace. The silence around money is one of the most carefully kept customs of the office, so ingrained that you would feel the impropriety of breaking it even before you understood why. You do not ask the woman beside you what she earns. You do not tell her what you earn. The number lives in your own envelope and nowhere else, and the whole culture of the place agrees, without ever saying so, that this is simply how it should be, that pay is a private matter, a thing between a person and the company and no one else at all. But the privacy is a costume worn by something else entirely, and part of you has always sensed it. The silence does not protect you. It protects the arrangement, because so long as no one compares, no one can see the pattern, and the pattern is this, that the man a few desks over, doing work not so different from your own, sometimes work you could do better in your sleep, takes home a figure noticeably larger than yours. The quiet is what keeps that difference invisible, and the invisibility is what keeps it safe from question. Should you ever happen to learn his number, and now and then a woman does, by accident or confidence, the knowledge sits heavily. The gap is real, and it is plain, and when you seek a reason for it, you find only vague and circular answers, that this is simply the way of things, that a man has a family to support, that his work is somehow weighted differently on the ledger even when it is the very same work. None of the reasons hold together under a steady look, and that is precisely why the steady look is so quietly discouraged, why the whole subject is wrapped in the soft muffling cloth of it, is not polite to ask. You are expected above all to accept it, and to accept it with gratitude. The paycheck itself was framed as a kind of gift, a thing you were fortunate to receive at all, and to question its size, to point at the gap and ask why, would have marked you as ungrateful, as a woman who didn't know how good she had it. So the acceptance was folded into the arrangement too, the smiling acceptance, the not asking, the treating of a plain unfairness as though it were simply the weather, unchangeable and not worth remarking upon. There is a particular weariness in being asked to be grateful for less, in knowing the truth of the gap, and being required to keep silent about it and more than silent, pleased. You did the work, fully and well, worth every dollar of what the man beside you earned and more, and you took home the smaller envelope and were expected to smile over it. The knowledge of that held quietly year after year is its own kind of weight, the weight of a fairness withheld and a silence enforced and a gratitude demanded on top of both. It is a custom that has been slowly pried open in the years since, the great hush around pay giving way, here and there to daylight, to the radical notion that comparing might reveal something worth knowing, that a woman has every right to ask why her envelope is thinner than the man's beside her. That opening was resisted fiercely, because the silence had protected so much, and every inch of transparency was won against real pushback from a world that preferred the quiet. But you carried the truth of it even when you could not speak it, and you did your work at the full worth the ledger denied you, and there is a clear-eyed dignity in that. You knew what you were worth, whatever the envelope said, and you knew what the silence was really for, and the knowing itself was a small refusal to be fooled. And if the hush around pay has thinned at all for those who came after, it is in part because women like you saw through it first, quietly, and held on to the plain truth of their own worth through all the years they were asked to keep it to themselves. This is a gentler passage, because it touches something that was very real and very rarely spoken. There was a certain kind of trouble a working woman might meet, an unwanted hand, a comment that lingered too long, a door held a moment too closely, and in 1973 it did not yet have a proper name. There was no clean word for it, no clear place to bring it, no rule written down that named it as wrong. So women handled it the way they handled so much, quietly, among themselves, warning one another with a raised eyebrow about which office to avoid, which meeting not to take alone. It would take the latter half of the decade for the words to finally arrive and give the shapeless thing a shape. Until then, you simply endured, and you looked out for the woman beside you, and that mattered more than anyone recorded. The difficulty of a thing without a name is that it becomes hard even to think about clearly, let alone to speak of. When there is no word for an experience, it slips through your fingers when you try to hold it up to the light, dissolving into 100 separate small moments that never quite add up out loud. You knew when something was wrong. You felt it plainly, the discomfort, the wish to step back, the sense of a line quietly crossed. But without a name to gather all those moments under, each one stood alone, deniable, easy to wave away as nothing, easy for others to tell you was nothing at all. And so, the burden of it fell, as such burdens did, on the women themselves, to carry and to manage without any framework to lean on. There was no clear place to bring it, no office down the hall whose purpose was to hear it, no printed rule you could point to that named the thing and declared it out of bounds. To speak of it too loudly risked being seen as the difficult one, the one who could not take things in stride, and the trouble, being nameless, could always be reframed as your own oversensitivity. So the safest course, most days, was to absorb it quietly and carry on. But the women did not carry it entirely alone, and this is the part worth holding close. In the absence of any formal shelter, they built an informal one out of their own watchfulness and care. The warnings passed between them in a language of glances and lowered voices, the raised eyebrow that said, "Do not be alone with him," the quiet word that steered a younger woman clear of a certain office, the small choreography of never leaving a new girl unaccompanied where trouble was known to wait. It was a whole protective network, unofficial and unrecorded, woven entirely from women looking out for women. You were part of that network, on both sides of it, protected by the women ahead of you and protecting the women who came after. You remembered who had warned you when you were new, the older woman who had quietly taken you under her wing, and you passed that same care forward without being asked, because it was simply what women did for one another in a world that offered them little else. There was real solidarity in it, a fierce and tender loyalty, and if the era gave it no name and kept no record of it, the women themselves knew exactly how much it was worth. It is worth saying, gently, that this is a heavier corner of the working woman's world than most, and that if any of it touches something in your own life, you deserve care and support far beyond what a quiet history like this can offer. The point here is not to dwell in the difficulty, but to honour the women who moved through it with such quiet courage, and to mark how much has changed, how the shapeless thing did at last receive its shape. For the words did come in the latter half of the decade, and the coming of the words changed everything. To name a thing is to make it real. To lift it out of the fog of it was probably nothing, and set it plainly in the light where it can at last be seen and named and refused. Once the name existed, the 100 separate deniable moments could be gathered together and understood as a single wrong, and what had been endured in silence could begin, slowly, to be spoken of, brought forward, stood against. But before the name arrived, there were the women, watching out for one another in the only ways available to them, passing their warnings hand to hand, building a quiet shelter of care where no formal shelter existed. They endured what they should not have had to endure, and they protected each other through it with a loyalty that never made it into any record. And there is a deep, quiet heroism in that. They held one another up in the dark, and when the light finally came, it fell on ground they had already been tending all along. The clock reads well past 5 now, and the floor has emptied of most of the men, and still you are here. The report has to be perfect by morning, and so you stay, feeding page after page into the machine under the buzz of the fluorescent lights, the office gone quiet and cavernous around you. You do this without overtime, often and almost always without your name attached to the finished thing. Tomorrow it will land on someone's desk with someone else's signature, and it will be praised, and the praise will not travel back to you. You have made a kind of peace with this, the way water makes peace with the shape of its container. But there is a particular ache to the empty office at night, to being the one who makes the work shine and then steps back into the shadows so cleanly no one thinks to look for you there. The office after hours is a different country entirely, and you have come to know it well. The bustle of the day has drained away. The men have gone home to their dinners, and the floor stretches out around you vast and still, lit only by the fluorescent tubes that hum their steady electric note overhead. Your single machine is the only sound, its clatter carrying strangely in the emptiness, and you sit at the centre of all that quiet, feeding page after page through it, building the thing that has to be ready by morning, alone in a room built for many. The work must be perfect, of course, because it is always the perfect work that falls to you, the difficult report, the crucial letter, the thing too important to trust to anyone whose hands are less sure. There is a backhanded honour in that, in being the one they turn to when it truly matters, and you feel it even as you resent the hour. You're here past 5, past 6, because you are the best, because the finished thing will bear the polish that only you can give it, and because the men who need it perfect have long since gone home, trusting that you will make it so. And you do make it so, and then you watch it walk away from you wearing another name. Tomorrow the report lands on a desk with someone else's signature at the bottom, and it is admired, and the admiration flows to him, the one who signed it, the one who presented it, the one who was home asleep while you fed the pages through the machine. Your hand in it, the long solitary evening, the care and the skill and the sacrificed hours, all of it dissolves into an invisible background, and the credit settles cleanly on shoulders that never felt the weight of the work at all. You have made your peace with this, mostly the way water makes its peace with whatever shape holds it. To rail against it every time would be to exhaust yourself against something that does not move, and so you have let yourself flow into the shape of it, accepting the arrangement, telling yourself the familiar comforts about being needed and being trusted, and being the one who can be counted on. The peace is real enough to carry you, and it is not entirely false, and yet it is a peace made around an absence, shaped by the very thing it declines to fight. But the ache finds you anyway, in the empty office at night, and it has its own particular flavour. It is the ache of the uncredited, the one who builds the beautiful thing and then steps back so completely that no one thinks to look for her behind it. You're so good at your own invisibility that it works perfectly, every time, the work shining and the worker unseen, and there is a loneliness in being that good at disappearing, in knowing that the better you do the job, the more thoroughly you vanish from the story of it. It is a pattern that has softened somewhat in the years since. The assumption that a woman's labour might simply be absorbed into a man's name without acknowledgement. The expectation that she would stay late and shine the work and expect nothing back. A newer worker might take for granted a small thing you rarely had, the plain naming of who did what, the credit travelling honestly back to the hands that earned it. That honesty was not yet reliably yours, but you did the work superbly in the quiet after everyone had gone, and the excellence of it was real whether or not your name was ever spoken beside it. You knew what you had made. You knew whose long evening had gone into the thing that was praised the next morning, and the knowing was a kind of quiet ownership that no missing signature could take from you. And when the last page was finally perfect, and you switched off the humming lights and walked out through the emptied office into the night, you carried home the plain private truth of it, that the shine on tomorrow's admired report was yours, entirely yours, however cleanly you had stepped back into the dark. It is December now, and there is a party, and the rules put on a festive disguise for an evening. There is punch, and there is something stronger for the men, and the desks are pushed aside, and for a few hours the whole careful order pretends to relax. But you know better than to believe it. You know that everything you do here is still being watched and quietly filed away, that too much punch or too loud a laugh or the wrong dance with the wrong man can follow a woman well into January, so you enjoy yourself carefully, in measured sips, keeping one foot always on the ground. The party is a test wearing a paper hat, and the women who last in this world are the ones who understand that the loosening is only ever a costume, and that Monday morning always, always comes. The transformation of the office is genuinely lovely, you will grant it that. The desks that hold your days are pushed back against the walls, and someone has strung a little tinsel, and there are paper decorations and a punch bowl gleaming under the fluorescent lights, and the whole familiar room takes on an unfamiliar softness. The machines are quiet for once. The telephones have stopped their ringing. The men have loosened their ties, and the women have worn something a touch brighter than the daily blouse, and for an evening the place that governs your hours pretends to be something warmer, something almost like a home. But you carry your watchfulness into the party the way you carry it everywhere, folded quietly beneath the festive surface. Because you have learned, through years of observation, that the loosening is only ever a costume the office puts on for a night, and that beneath the tinsel the old order stands exactly where it always did. The eyes are still watching, more gently perhaps, more indulgently, but watching all the same. The small missteps of the evening do not dissolve with the punch. They are noted and remembered, and they wait for you in the daylight of the new year. So you drink in measured sips, 1 cup of the mild punch made to last, never the something stronger that the men reach for so freely. You have seen what the strong drink does at these parties, how it loosens tongues and blurs judgment, and you have seen how differently the aftermath falls on a woman than on a man. A man who drinks too much at the office party is forgiven by Monday, his excess a small joke, a story told with a chuckle. A woman who drinks too much becomes a different kind of story, one that clings to her, one whispered rather than laughed, and so you keep the 1 foot always on the ground. You're careful too about the dancing and about the men, and about the particular hazards the evening arranges. There is always a man or two who takes the loosened rules as license, who leans a little closer, holds a little longer, and you have learned to navigate them with a practised grace, warm enough not to cause a scene, distant enough to protect yourself, forever managing the delicate line between friendly and available that the party makes so treacherous. It is work, this careful navigation, the same emotional labour of the workday dressed up in holiday clothes, and you perform it with a smile that hides the calculation entirely. The younger women do not always understand this yet, and you watch them with a tenderness edged in worry. You see them relax fully into the false loosening, laugh too freely, accept the second cup, believe the costume is the truth, and you know that some of them will pay for it in January in ways they cannot yet foresee. Now and then you steer one of them gently, a quiet word, a hand on the arm, the older woman's care passing down again as it always does. You cannot make the rules fair, but you can help a younger woman survive them, and so you do. And there is real pleasure in the evening too, threaded through all the watchfulness, because you're not made of stone and the warmth is not entirely false. There is genuine laughter, genuine companionship, a real, if temporary softening of the daily formality that lets you see your colleagues as people for a night. You enjoy it, carefully, within the boundaries you have drawn for yourself, and the carefulness does not cancel the enjoyment so much as frame it, the way a careful woman can have a lovely time and remember it clearly the next day with nothing to regret. It is a wariness that has eased somewhat in the years since, as the sharp double standard of the office party has slowly dulled, as the watching has grown less relentless, and the aftermath less punishing, particularly for women. A newer worker might relax more fully into such an evening, might trust the loosening a little more, might not carry quite the same quiet vigilance beneath the tinsel. That fuller ease was not yet safely yours, but you navigated the evening with a grace that made the vigilance invisible, enjoying what could be enjoyed and guarding what had to be guarded, and there is a quiet mastery in that. You understood the party for exactly what it was, a test wearing a paper hat, and you passed it every year, carrying your measured cup and your steady judgment and your care for the younger women through the festive hours. And when the tinsel came down and Monday arrived, as Monday always did, you walked back into the unchanged office with nothing trailing behind you, clear-eyed and unscathed, exactly as you had planned. Let's name the ceiling you keep bumping against, the one made of something clearer than glass. You can rise a little. You can become the head secretary, the office manager, the one who truly runs the floor while a man takes the title and the office with the window. But above that there is a level you are simply not meant to reach, and everyone knows it, and no one will say it. And that is precisely what makes it so hard to fight. There is no rule pinned to the wall declaring the limit. There is only the strange, consistent way the doors above you fail to open, the promotions that pass you by for men you trained, the polite explanations that never quite hold together. You are told the sky is open. You feel the ceiling with your fingertips every single day. The rising you are allowed is real, and you have done it, climbing as high as the permitted ladder reaches. You have become the head secretary, or the office manager, the woman whose competence the whole floor depends upon, the one who knows where everything lives and how everything runs and what will go wrong before it does. It is a genuine position, earned through genuine skill, and you hold it with pride. But you have also come to understand its exact shape, which is the shape of a ceiling, a level beyond which the ladder simply does not go, however capable your hands, however ready you are for more. Above that level sit the offices with the windows and the titles that carry real authority, and the men who occupy them, and the strange consistent way that you're never quite invited to join them. You watch the promotions announced, and time after time they go to men, sometimes to men you yourself trained, young men who arrived knowing nothing and learned the work at your patient's side, and then rose smoothly past you into the rooms you will never enter. You taught them, and they climbed on the knowledge you gave them, and no one seems to find this strange but you. The cruelty of it is precisely that there is no rule to point to, nothing pinned to any wall that says a woman may rise no higher than this. If there were such a rule, you could name it, argue against it, drag it into the light. But the ceiling is clearer than glass, invisible until you strike it, and the striking always looks like something else, an unfortunate coincidence, a matter of fit, a question of the particular circumstances of this particular decision. Each closed door has its own polite explanation, and each explanation almost holds together, and only when you line them all up across the years does the pattern become unmistakable. You have asked in the careful indirect ways available to you, and you have received the careful indirect answers. He has more experience, though you trained him. The clients expect a certain kind of person in that role, though you have handled the clients for years. The position requires long hours and travel, though you have given the office your evenings without complaint since before he was hired. Each reason is offered reasonably, even kindly, and each one dissolves the moment you examine it, and yet together they form a wall as solid as stone, all the more solid for having no single brick you can pull out. And the whole time you're told cheerfully that the sky is open, that a hard-working woman can go anywhere, that there is nothing holding you back but your own ambition. This is perhaps the strangest part, the bright official story that contradicts the plain daily evidence, the insistence that no ceiling exists even as you feel it against your fingertips every single day. You're asked to believe the story and to disbelieve your own experience, to smile at the promise of an open sky while watching the doors close one after another, and the dissonance of that is its own quiet exhaustion. You have made your peace with the ceiling in the only ways available, by taking pride in the height you have reached, by finding real satisfaction in the work you are permitted, by knowing your own worth so clearly that no closed door can fully convince you otherwise. But the peace is edged with a clear-eyed sorrow, because you know what you could do with the rooms you will never be given, know how well you would fill the offices with the windows, and there is a particular grief in a capability that the world declines to use. It is a barrier that has been named at last in the years since, and the naming of it changed something, the way naming always does. Once the invisible ceiling had a name, the pattern could be pointed to, the polite explanations lined up and seen through, the closed doors understood not as coincidences but as a wall to be dismantled. That naming came too late for many, for all the women who spent their whole careers pressed against a limit no one would admit was there. But you pressed against it anyway, and you rose as high as the ladder allowed and knew you were made for higher, and there is a fierce dignity in that clear knowledge. You never mistook the bright story for the truth. You felt the ceiling honestly and named it to yourself even when no one else would, and in doing so you kept faith with your own real worth. And if the doors opened wider for the women who came after, it was in part because women like you had pushed against them first, quietly, with fingertips that never stopped reaching upward. And so the day comes gently to its close, the way every day in that world eventually did. You have walked through all of it now, the careful morning at the closet, the stockings pulled on against the heat, the clock by the door and its purple ink, the coffee carried desk to desk, the machines and the shorthand and the soft blue haze, the girls and the ceiling and the long uncredited evenings. You have felt the whole texture of a working woman's ordinary day, the small rules woven through every hour, and the quiet grace with which she carried them. Take a moment before sleep to honour those women. They rose in dim bedrooms and dressed with care and caught the early bus into the gold-lit city, and they held whole offices together with hands no one thought to thank. They looked out for one another in the lounge and the typing pool, passed their warnings and their kindnesses from woman to woman, and kept their own worth safe inside them through years that asked them to keep it hidden. They did not think of themselves as remarkable. They were simply living faithfully, with a dignity so quiet it went almost entirely unrecorded. Perhaps you carry something small from them into your own days. The patience to do a plain task beautifully, the care to notice the person beside you, the wisdom to know your own worth even when the world is slow to name it. So let your shoulders drop now, and let the day slip away, mile by mile, the way theirs did on the ride home. You're here, safe and warm, and the work is done. Rest easy tonight, and let the gentle light of all those ordinary steadfast lives carry you softly down into sleep.